How many of those Blue Paisleys do you think even exist?
The thought is that, Fender probably mocked up some when they were trying to decide what color. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's 2 or 3.
Brad's got this Blue Paisley. I don't know what we can say about, but I've played the guitar.
Yeah.
It's been announced. The guitar is weird because I did the interview and I ran into you when I was walking in to do the interview.
Yeah.
And I played the guitar, and everyone's been coming up to me saying, how good is that guitar? Is that guitar really great? And I said, look, I can't explain it. A Tele is just a Tele. Like, on one hand, a Tele is just a Tele. On the other hand, that's a really great guitar. That one's really special. What is the deal with that guitar?
Well, I can say that guitar is really special.
Yeah.
And I've played hundreds, maybe thousands of Telecasters, and the thing that was amazing about that guitar was, it kind of got put together, as it were, and it's just as soon, nothing was done to it. There was no setup work. It was just bolted together. This was, old parts that were all of a sudden, we put it together and hand it to him, and he plays it, and it's like, what is going on? It sounded so good. It sounded like old Pink, but better.
Yeah.
Because to me, that was always, in the past, that was probably my favorite of his guitars. And it was not because it was the greatest guitar of all time, but it had his voice, because that's the sound, that's the sound on so many of his albums. I mean, and that's the sound on, Mud on the Tires, and that's the Fishing Song. That's all these tunes. That guitar has a certain sound, and it's like you plug that guitar into an Aquapus or a DD2, and you get it into an old AC30 and a Dr. Z amp, and it's like, and it has that thing. And that guitar immediately had that thing, but more.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of crazy because I know, because I watched the interview, of course, and you did a great job.
Oh, I so appreciate it.
And it was just, it's just like, even if you play Old Pink or La Brea next to it, it's like, what does this guitar have? It's like it just has more.
Yeah.
It just has more low end, and it has more pop. It has more assertiveness. It has, it has a lot of really great things going on. And every once in a while you just have these things that, it's like, why is it doing that?
And that guitar is actually from 57.
67.
Right? Or I'm sorry, 67.
Right.
Where his original Pink Paisley's from 68.
Correct.
So the 60s. So what do you have a sense? Because to me, it's always weird that in 67, it's kind of like, it's sort of the beginning of a downturn for Fender quality, because it's CBS. At that point, CBS owns Fender, right?
Well, yeah.
And they're still figuring out, they're still putting paper on these things and trying to make cool guitars, but Brad goes, it's a bad idea. He said in that interview, he goes, this was a bad business idea.
Yeah. So the company changed hands in January of 65. So really everything,
the transition years.
But 66 is where you start seeing, a different logo. You start seeing the transition logo. 67 is a big transition year. That's where you lose the Kluson machine heads. You start seeing the F tuners. You lose the transition logo. You get the big black CBS logo because they were more concerned about it being visible on television.
Versus the spaghetti logo, which is so clean.
Right. Or even the gold transition logo.
Yes.
It's a cool look. And you go from blackface to silverface with the drip edge.
Right.
And so, the 67 is a really big transition year. And Fender was really, there was any time a company is purchased, there's a lot of pressure for it to be more profitable. And everyone's trying to squeeze out more money out of everything. And you've got to sell more. And this was also at a time when Gibsons were really becoming pretty cool because of the guitar heroes. Because you really didn't have Hendrix as much yet. And you kind of had Jeff Beck and Clapton and Mike Bloomfield. A lot of guys were starting to play bursts and 335s and things like that. And so Fender was really feeling like they needed to try different things, and that's where you get things like the Coronados, these things that look kind of like 335s, but with, Strat-looking kind of headstocks.
Yes, yeah.
And they were also having trouble. They didn't want to pay the money for lighter ash, and so they start trying to hollow them out some, and that's where you get what's called the smuggler's guitars, where they would route out underneath the pick guard,
right.
and then they found out that didn't make enough of a difference. So then you get the thin line that comes out in '68. And then the Paisley thing, which was, again, it was kind of late because 66, 67, when they're, because fads change quickly, and so the whole flower power thing and hippie thing was kind of like free love. It was already kind of moving on. Even by 68. So it's kind of like they're kind of, it was kind of a little late. And that's why the guitar, really, I think also because of how much more it was. I think y'all talked about the fact that it was like,
it was more money and it looked disgusting, basically. Yeah.
Because a regular Telecaster was $225, and then it was like, $275 for the Paisley. And it's like the only difference is like they've put this contact paper on the front and back, and they've put poly on top of that, and they've bursted the sides, and they decided to charge a lot more for that for the aesthetic. So it's an interesting time, and frankly I think that's another really golden era of guitar. So it doesn't really surprise me that Blue Paisley is so great, because the maple cap neck guitars, 66, 67, 68, those are some of the most consistently good guitars, and the rosewood board ones too. But I remember even back when I was teching for Brad in the early 2000s, and I was talking about getting a vintage guitar, and this is back when a Blackguard was probably $10,000 or something like that, and it probably was reasonable. But we were doing a session with Red Volkart. I think we were doing Spaghetti Western Swing or something like that.
From On the Tires.
From Mud on the Tires.
It's a great fun track.
And so, we're hanging out after they record it. We went to a Mexican restaurant. We're sitting there in Bellevue, and I was, lamenting to Red how much vintage, Telecasters are. And he said, well, you ought to just get you, I'm not going to try to imitate Red Volkart. That was terrible. But he said, you need to get a 66 through 68, maple cap, neck Tele. He said, those are consistently good. They still have, a lot of them still have a nitro finish, and they still have like the cloth covered wires instead of the plastic insulated wires. And, they're just, they're really, you can find really good ones. And there's just something about that era of guitar that I really like. And it is a real transition time where things are changing over. Yeah. But there's just a lot of good guitars from that era, and it's something that I've always liked those guitars. They have a real assertiveness to them.
Yes, they really do. How many of those Blue Paisleys do you think even exist?
I mean, this is just a thought, but the thought is that Fender probably mocked up some when they were trying to decide what color. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's 2 or 3 or something like that.
Yeah. That's kind of like what you would think, right?
Yeah. So not a lot of them, because that's they're going to get some bodies. They're going to put some of that paper on there. They're going to finish. Maybe they're going to finish it out into a whole guitar, and then they're going to put it in front of the marketing and sales department. Yeah. And then they're going to be like,
what do we think? For all there were more that were destroyed, or they said, that's not good, and then they tore the paper off and finished them in something else or whatever.
It's amazing. A lot of companies, started destroying prototypes and things like that. Yeah. And unless it was just like a really trusted friend of the company or an employee that really wanted it, a lot of times those things started being just destroyed. So I remember talking to a guy that was working with Leo Fender at G&L, and that Leo didn't want any prototypes to go out there because he hated when those prototypes would go out there and they'd be
You told the story on an episode where who was the guitar player who wanted to keep a prototype because he loved it? Yeah. Who was that, Jorgensen?
No, it was a friend of Jorgensen's named Jeff Ross.
Jeff Ross wanted to keep a prototype, and he wouldn't let him.
Yeah, he said, no, we're gonna run it through the saw.
Yeah, right.
So, Yeah. So I think that, maybe some things, drifted out, maybe some things were destroyed. But yeah, a lot of times, you're trying to control your image and everything else. And so sometimes you don't want those things to go out there. And so sometimes you throw things into the chipper.
Yeah.
So